Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor. We haven't said too much about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here on this program, other than we don't want him anywhere near the White House as president of the United States because, well, he's a pretty liberal left-wing Democrat and he's got some pretty radical environmental views. That said, we do love the fact that Biden is terrified of him. The whole apparatus of the Democrat Party is trying to do whatever they can to silence him, censor him, and squash him so that his voice can't be heard. That's why we took special notice of an appearance he made last night on the NewsNation cable network. He was doing a town hall, and he said something. We're going to take some time looking at it that really does shine a light on where the Democrats have gone since his dad was the almost Republican nominee for president back in 1968, and why Joe Biden is terrified to have this man's voice heard. Here, take a look.
You say that you're a Democrat, but you're getting a lot of support from a lot of leading voices on the right, like Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, former President Donald Trump. Many Democrats fear that you're a spoiler in the race, that you will damage President Biden in the primary and grease the skids for former President Trump to return to the Oval Office. This week, former President Trump said about you, Kennedy is smart and he's a common sense guy. What kind of man do you think Donald Trump is?
All right, let's pause there for a moment. First of all, she's absolutely right. That's why the Democrats are scared of him, because they think he does do damage to Joe Biden. In fact, he already has done damage to Joe Biden. You know, in the latest polls, Joe Biden is currently at about 66% amongst Democrats for the nomination. He's the incumbent president. He's running against two people, Kennedy and Marianne Williamson, who have never held elected office before. There's been no debates, and he's only getting 2/3 of the Democrats to support him for the nomination. That's a real problem. Kennedy, on the other hand, he's getting about 20% already. But did you see what the reporter did here? You're supposed to be interviewing a candidate about what they stand for, what they would do if they were to be elected president. And the question is, tell us what you think of Donald Trump. This is part of the problem with the media. This is why you're looking for alternatives to this mindset that you see in Washington, D.C. right now, where everything is about your reaction to Donald Trump. Well, Kennedy did a terrific job with this question. Let's watch what he says, and we'll watch it together, because there are certain moments here that are incredibly important for all of us to reflect on. Go ahead.
No, here's what I'm not going to do in this race. I'm not going to attack other people personally. I don't think it's good for our country. And I think, what I'm trying to do in this race is bring people together, is to try to bridge the divide between Americans. And guess what? When my dad died.
Let's pause here for a quick second, because this is critically important. He's using the same language that Joe Biden used 4 years ago when he said, I want to bring this country together again. We've been too divided. Vote for me and I'll bring people together. What kind of job did he do bringing us together? I want to bring people together, but anytime I have a chance, I'm going to call half of this country who voted for my opponent right-wing radical fascists who are racist and support Jim Crow laws if they want to ask for an ID when you go to vote. He's illuminating right now, by using Biden's language, exactly what a liar Joe Biden was and how divisive he has been. All right, let's continue.
And we took this train ride from, this 7.5-hour train ride that was supposed to be 2 hours. I was with him when he died in Los Angeles, and then we brought his body from New York, Penn Station to Union Station in Washington, D.C. And it was a 2.5-hour ride, but it took 7.5 hours because there were 2.5 million people on that train track. And it was the cross-section of America, and all of the major urban stations in Trenton, Newark, Wilmington, and Baltimore. There were Black Americans singing Battle Hymn of the Republic. There were whites in the rural areas who are holding up signs, Goodbye Bobby, Pray for us Bobby, American flag, standing, saluting. 4 years later, and they had supported my father in the primaries in 1968. 4 years later, in 1972, they were not supporting my father, and they were not supporting George McGovern, who was aligned with my father on all these issues. Instead, the vast majority of them were supporting George Wallace. And, my father was able to harness these populist energies. In the last day of his life, he won the most rural state in this country, South Dakota, and the most urban. He was able to bridge the divide among people who would otherwise be Republican, but wanted somebody who was common sense, who was able to appeal to their idealism, who was able to find the hero in each of them, who was able to get them to transcend narrow self-interest and see themselves as part of a community and part of this, incredible American adventure in modeling self-governance for the rest of the world. And so I'm proud that President Trump likes me, even though I don't agree with him on most of his issues. Because I don't want to alienate people. I want to bring people together. I'm proud that all these people like me and that I have independent supporters and Democratic supporters, and that I'm able to bring a lot of people. Every Democrat says, I want to end the polarization. But how do you do that without talking to people who don't agree with you? How do you do that without appealing to people? My purpose is to find the issues, the values that we have in common, rather than, focus on the issues and the personalities that keep us all apart.
Let me tell you something. That message right there, whether delivered by a Democrat or a Republican, is exactly what the vast majority of Americans are waiting to hear. And they're also waiting to actually see it put in practice. You've got a Democrat right there saying, I'm proud that Donald Trump likes me, even though I disagree with him. I'm proud to have support from people who also support Donald Trump. That's actually what it looks like to be a unifier. And I know that he's running as a Democrat. And again, I don't want him to be president, but there's something incredibly appealing, not just about that message, but the way Robert Kennedy delivers the message. And I'm sure you think that this is a real lesson for the Democrats, and take that, Joe Biden. But before you go too far down that road, this is a very important lesson for the Republicans in this race, and most specifically Donald Trump. If Donald Trump were asked the same question, what kind of man do you think Joe Biden is? Would he have answered this same way? If Donald Trump was asked, how can we unify this country considering how divided we are? Would Donald Trump have answered the same way? I think that the people who support Joe Biden and the people who support Donald Trump are missing something very important about presidential politics. I would love to live in a world where everybody votes for someone based on policy and plans for what they're going to do when they get into office and party platforms. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of voters in this country vote for the person, not the policies. And the people who are supporting Donald Trump, and most importantly, the people in Donald Trump's camp, they need to recognize that there are a lot of people in this country who just don't like him. And he's got to spend some time actually maybe learning a lesson from Kennedy here and recognizing that the language he uses and the way he presents himself, not just his ideas, are just as important in getting votes. The fact is, both parties could learn something from Mr. Kennedy after this exchange. One other thing, a lot of people say that Kennedy is dangerous because of his vaccine positions, and I get that. We're purposely not really talking about it. But I will say this, I'm sure you noticed that his voice is very distinctive. It sounds damaged. It's hard to listen to sometimes. A lot of people wonder, why is that? What's wrong with his voice? Well, he was injured by a flu vaccine years and years and years ago. It's one of the reasons why he's so passionate about that issue. You should keep that in mind. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.